John here, and back again with another review. And this is also for Kevin. He wanted me to talk about and review the 2002 remake, The Time Machine. And I did see this in a theater way back when. And I can't believe it's been that long ago, but I do remember seeing this in the theater. And rewatching it again, I think it's a passable, like slightly above average remake. It was directed by Simon Wells, who, prior to this, Simon Wells directed Balto, for people that remember that animated film back in the day. He also directed The Prince of Egypt. And the gist of the story here, you have Guy Pearce in the film. He's our lead character, Alexander Hartigan, and he's a scientist and inventor, and he's determined to prove that, time travel is possible. But when the girl he loves is tragically killed, Alexander is determined to go back in time to change the path. And then shortly after, testing his theories, and he tries to, go back in time and fix what happened, but, his girlfriend still dies with a different outcome. Shortly after, he goes into the future. And in the future, he runs into Orlando Jones, who is this hologram of the Vox system, which you see in the future. And then, fast forward, thousands of years, like this movie here, he comes into the society of the Eloi, and they're being hunted by the Morlocks, and that's kind of the gist of the story, the plot. But, the cast here, Guy Pearce, I think he does a good job here. I do think that Rod Taylor's, he did a better job performance-wise, but, Guy Pearce is not that bad of an actor. He was good in The Count of Monte Cristo. I remember liking that movie, which I think came out the same year, or maybe the year before. Later on, he would be in Iron Man 3, I think, and some other stuff. But, I do like Guy Pearce as an actor. You also have Mark Addy in here. And, Mark Addy, around this time, he was in quite a few stuff. He was in A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger. He was in that Flintstones sequel where they go to Las Vegas, which is not good. But, he was Fred Flintstone in that movie. I don't know why I thought of that, but... And again, it's not a good movie. But Mark Addy, you would see him appear like here and there around this time in certain movies. And then later in Game of Thrones, I believe. And then you have Jeremy Irons in here. And Jeremy Irons, he's like, the head of the Morlocks here, which I'll talk about. He's like the leader of the Morlocks. So, the one thing that's a little bit different here with this movie, compared to this movie, is in the beginning, they kind of, get into the romance, the love interest, and that's kind of like a plot point here. In the beginning where he tries to change, the outcome of, what happened to his girlfriend. She was murdered. He tries to go back and fix it, and then she dies a different way. So, maybe it's a little bit different there, and the score, to mention the score here, because I thought the score wasn't bad, by Klaus Badelt. Badelt? Yeah, the score is by Klaus Badelt. And I thought the score was decent, I will say that. And, okay, if I get into the film and if I talk about, stuff that I didn't mind, because there's some stuff here that isn't bad. Like the Time Machine is okay. I mean, I do think the Time Machine, the way it looks, the design is better in this movie. Maybe it's because it's 1960 and I appreciate it more. Here it's not, for what they were able to pull off, in terms of the effects, because you do see the time machine, travel through time and stuff like that, and they utilize on the effects and the transformations of, the surroundings and the planet, which I like that. I mean, I thought that was a good, nice touch. So the time machine itself isn't bad. When they go into the future, it's not bad. And that's when you see Orlando Jones like he's a hologram. And there's one scene that I remember where that he goes into the future and the moon is breaking up and they're trying to bring in Guy Pearce, and I thought that was interesting. And then you get into the way future where you have basically the Eloi. They live in these pods on these cliffs. And I would say for me, that's kind of where the film kind of slowed down for me, is when, Guy Pearce is, trying to become part of the society, or, you have the girl in the future that is part of the Eloi. Like, that whole thing I didn't really care for. Guy Pearce, having a thing for, the woman in the film, or, like, and, when he's with the Eloi. And again, they live in these pods on the cliffs. And then you have the Morlocks, which the Morlocks here I thought were solid. I mean, this is at a time when, Lord of the Rings was out. You got to think about, at this time period, you have Lord of the Rings, and they're pretty much, when you look at these Morlocks, they're like the orcs, but if they were on steroids. If the orcs, were on the juice, that's what they would look like. These are the Morlocks in the movie. So I do like the makeup. I appreciate the makeup and, the practical touches on the suits and, the way they look. I will say I wasn't a fan of the way that they, like would move or jump, and like you can definitely tell there's some like CGI there with, some of the movement of the Morlocks, when they're pouncing or running. But I do appreciate, the practical, aspect of the look and the Morlocks and the way they looked here in the movie. That's one thing I will say, if I had to admit here, which I did here in this movie, I do like the Morlocks here a little bit better. Then again, that's just me. And again, I know that might be controversial, but I do like the Morlocks here a little bit more. But again, I do not like, when they would throw in CGI, and, that I wasn't a fan of. And they do have some references here, like little nods to the original about, there's one scene where you have the thing with the books, where, the Vox, Orlando Jones, is showing, Guy Pearce, the library, and then Guy Pearce, when he goes to the books, it crumbles. And that's a memorable scene in this movie that I forgot to mention, is when, the books, turn to dust. And they do that here too, which I think is done better in the original. So you do have a couple of, references like that. They even mention the book, the novel. They mention it in the remake here. Orlando Jones, references the novel in the future, saying it was written by H.G. Wells and stuff like that. And then later on, when you get to the Morlocks, again, going back to the Morlocks, you have their lair and stuff. And that's when we're introduced to Jeremy Irons. Jeremy Irons, he's, the leader of the Morlocks here. And I thought the way he looked, I thought was really good. With the white makeup and the eyes and stuff. And I thought, for being this character, I thought, of course he's a villain. Jeremy Irons, he's going to be a villain no matter what. I mean, whether in Die Hard 3 or The Lion King, Jeremy Irons, can play a good villain. And again, he's the leader of the Morlocks here, and leading up to when Guy Pearce is traveling back, they get into a little bit of a fight. And I like the way that Jeremy Irons gets it, where he's trying to pull Guy Pearce out of the time machine, and like it's getting ready to travel through time, and Jeremy Irons like decomposes, because he's hanging on to his arm. And I didn't mind that. I thought that was a cool effect. So I will say, with this movie here, and it's kind of like a similar ending, I do think this is the better film. I think this is the stronger film. The original is stronger, in terms of Rod Taylor's performance, in terms of, the time machine, the way it looks, the direction by George Powell, the production value and the way that, it lays out the story, and the Eloy, which will come into the story later. And the Morlocks, again, I think were fine. I mean, that's one thing about the remake. And again, people might disagree. I thought the Morlocks looked a bit better here. But again, if I would do one thing here, actually, for me, there's two things I would change about this movie. I think three. The more I think about it, three. I think you needed a stronger director. That's, the one thing here about this movie. I don't think Simon Wells is the strongest director. Like, okay, you're going to do a remake of The Time Machine, but why get the guy that directed Balto and The Prince of Egypt? And I'm not saying they're bad movies, but, why this guy? I mean, it seems like, maybe they wanted to go with a safe director. It seemed like, that's what it feels like a little bit with this movie, that the direction is kind of safe. And, okay, again, I'm not saying that the movies that he directed before were bad, but, you can tell that the direction here is not the strongest. And even though Guy Pearce does a good job, and the supporting cast of Mark Addy, and the budget is used well, I mean, but I don't think this director here was the strongest choice. Also, too, I would say, for me, the parts, when he's, getting to know the society, and he's in the pods with the Eloy and stuff, and, that to me wasn't the most interesting. I mean, this movie here, it's not a long film at all. It's an hour and a half. It's not a 2-hour film. But also too, I said three things. So I think the direction is not the strongest. I think, the romance in the movie, wasn't really needed. And I may have mentioned it already. I was trying to think on, like, I said three things, but I can only come up with two. But anyways, I mean, maybe I just kind of forgot. But anyways, I would say at the end of the day here, The Time Machine from '02, again, it's a passable, slightly above average remake. Again, Guy Pearce isn't bad in the movie. The budget is used well. I just think that for me, it's not a strong movie. It's not a strong remake. It's not an impactful movie. It doesn't top this in any way, shape, or form. I think it just, maybe it played it a little bit too safe, or it needed a better director. I like the score. I didn't mind the score here to the film, and the Morlocks, I thought, looked good, but there was CGI in there that you didn't need, and in regards to that, and so much more. So this is definitely the far superior movie, and I would say, like, if I gave this somewhere on the 1 to 10 scale, this is like a 6 to me, again, just a passable, time waster. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the remake. But thank you, Kevin. Thank you to Kevin again for the request. Hope I did a good job. But thank you for watching, and have a good day.